Hi guys, hi to the next session of DevTalks we have today, and we'll be waiting for a few seconds before we start with the live stream, and we'll wait for people to join in. And on that note, you can enjoy a little bit of relaxing music. Hi guys. So we are live and we are currently with 20 people watching us. Welcome you all to the next talk we have today, the next webinar, the series of webinars we have been doing yet. It's called Dev Talks, and we have our next speaker with us today. And we know it's late at night here, but time is a relative concept because we have a speaker who is joining us early in the morning from the other part of the world right now. And on that note, I would like to introduce our next speaker, the speaker for today, Mr. Alan Kent. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Dr. Alan Kent because this was made specifically clear to me. He has a PhD degree, no denying the fact. And on that note, sir, welcome you to Dev Talks.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I actually don't normally use my title, so I am actually a PhD. I grew up in Australia. I'm now living in the US, but I did my PhD in text indexing, and then just as a little bit of a history about myself, I actually came from Australia to eBay and was involved in the search engine project there at eBay before, which is where I first got involved in e-commerce. I then moved on to Magento, which was owned by eBay at the time, and now at Google as a developer advocate at Google, but focusing on web e-commerce. So it's a little bit of a history about myself. But cool. Well, I assume I just get into the presentation. So I'm going to bring up some slides. So what I'm going to be talking about is really talking about e-commerce as a professional field for, and the opportunities in e-commerce. And let's bring up a deck.
Okay, sir. I think e-commerce is a currently hot topic that we are dealing with right now, and everyone joined us will be interested to know about it. And on that note, I'll just bring your screen up. Yeah, we are good
Okay.
to go.
Okay. So like all good decks, we made I've got the deck together and I was reviewing it last night, and we started out talking about the impact of e-commerce on developers. And this is in the face of this current little pandemic called coronavirus and the impact it was having. But when I got to the end of it, I really thought probably a better title for this talk would have been the opportunities that e-commerce creates for developers during this current event, because there are a number of new possibilities and options that come up. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about. And there was because this is from a developer club and related to universities, I found a little quote that you may have heard before, but live as if you're going to die tomorrow, but learn as if you're going to live together. And it seems particularly apt at this sort of point. And one of the reasons I'm sharing about e-commerce, particularly to students, is I think understanding it is going to be, if you get into the e-commerce space, it is a lifelong, there is just so much going on in this space. It's never going to go away. It's here for the long term. But what is e-commerce? And I can't imagine many people have not experienced e-commerce on a website these days, or transacting online. But different people have different definitions. And so the simplest definition is if a transaction involves online a transaction, like making a payment online, That's a definition of e-commerce. But you've also got, what happens if commerce, it's just normal commerce, but it involves an online component? One example, an extreme, is if you're just advertising your business online, is that still e-commerce? And I would probably say no, that's getting across the line. But some people may say yes. There are marketplaces. You've got your Flipkart, your Myntra, eBays, and Amazons. Well, they're pretty clearly e-commerce. But what about a ride-sharing service like Ola and Uber? They transact online, but there's a very dedicated experience. It's not the more traditional site that you expect with, here I'm going to search through various products, pick a product. And my real point here is that e-commerce, there isn't just one way of doing e-commerce. There's a big breadth of related technologies. You still have to worry about online payments, but you may want to do much more customized experiences. And some people sort of tend to exclude them from the definition of e-commerce. And personally, I don't. I think any experience where you're transacting online is valid as an e-commerce experience. But let's just go back. If you're relatively new to some of the terminology in e-commerce, an e-commerce site's generally pretty easy. You might have a link to a homepage. It might be in an email. It might be an ad. There's different ways you might arrive at the homepage of a site. You've then got, on the homepage, you often put information about your site. You may share your primary sales going on at the moment, or products that are selling particularly well and you want to advertise. Beyond that, a common way to get to a product page is actually to navigate through category pages. And this might be pages like menswear or ladies' shoes. And depending upon the site, you'll break down the information on your site and your products into different categories. And often through your navigation menus, you can then drill your way down into different areas, possibly showing some information along the way until you get to a product page. The product page or the product details page shows you a particular product. You may be able to choose options like size and color and see photos of it and so forth. You then add that to your cart. After you build your cart up for a while, you then go to a checkout page and you pay. So it's all pretty simple, right? Well, there's a few other technologies and things that are going on behind the scenes that you might not think about very much when you're using a site. But if you want to get into how it actually works behind the covers, there's a lot more going on here than first meets the eye. So there's a whole area. I'm not going to go through all of these boxes, but I'm going to hit on a couple of them just to give an idea of the breadth. And the message simply is there's a lot of depth to e-commerce. And it's not a matter of saying, oh, I want to become an expert in every single area. You can try to, but you can also specialize in particular areas. So you've got the whole area of like, how do people actually find your site in the first place? And they may either find your homepage or they may link straight to the product page. You got into marketing, email, analytics, SEO. You've then got the area of managing information about all your products. If your site's got thousands to millions of products, that's not necessarily a simple job. You've got to keep track of the images. You've got to keep track of the text describing them. You may have to localize the text. Do you want more richer textual experiences, like with better formatting? You may want to share that information out to different sites. Like, and even though you have your own e-commerce site, you may still want to share products on a marketplace and have another sales channel. And then you've got different types of products. You've got just a simple product. You just click it and say, I want it, like a packet of toothpaste. But other products, if you took shirts, you've got different colors, you've got different sizes, and so you need to pick which variant of a product you want. You might buy things in a bundle, and then you get into the actual cart. You've got discounts, like buy one, get one free. Channel management, we've talked a little bit about before, pushing it out to different marketplaces, and then insights. And all the way through, you've got different data. And so you could be looking at machine learning to get more value out of all the data you've collected along the way. So the point to really getting across, as I said, I'm not going to go through all these boxes, but there's a lot of breadth to e-commerce. And your first thought about just being a fairly simple experience, I mean, I haven't even touched order management, inventory management, how to optimize shipping. If you've got multiple warehouses in different parts of the country, is it better to ship from different locations, or should you make sure you always ship from the one location? There's a lot of depth going into the whole field behind e-commerce. It's also worthwhile understanding the e-commerce ecosystem. It's not like there's only one way of doing e-commerce. And so if you look at if you're trying to host your own site, for example, there's a number of platforms, the SaaS platforms, and I talk about like the Shopify's, BigCommerce, Volusion. I'm not up with the latest ones in India, but there's a lot of different platforms you can just use to get your own site up with your own domain name. There's also a lot of open source platforms, and then you've got the option of finding someone to host it for you or run it yourself on your own machines, like spin up some AWS instances or, of course, Google Cloud instances. But there are also extensions and technology partners. And so a technology partner might be a company that focuses on shipping or international taxation law. And so rather than you trying to work out how to do it yourself, because the platforms don't do the whole story for you, they might do 60%, and then they expect you to pick your favorite extension to flesh out the story. And that's where you get into the variation, because not all e-commerce sites are the same. So let's put extensions onto it to customize the site for your particular needs. You then also have agencies. They're people who provide manpower. We've got experts on how to build e-commerce sites. Of course, you've got the marketplaces like your Amazons and eBays, and they've got different feels to it, and a Flipkart and so forth. You've also got social media, and we're emerging a lot more super apps and doing commerce through those apps more natively. So there's a different ways of getting involved if you're actually interested in getting into the e-commerce space. It's not like there's only one way to get involved. There's a number of different players going on here, and a different companies you can look to join up with. But I was going to spend a little bit of time talking about the coronavirus, and it's in a global impact, obviously, and the really hard decisions that people have to make, because it's all about people's lives versus their livelihoods. And coronavirus has obviously had a big impact on commerce, and it has a rippling effect through the industry. For example, my wife's company, she works at a startup here in the Bay Area, and a number of projects got put on hold because the companies were concerned, and so a lot of their customers stopped projects that they were going to do, so that immediately cut their revenue stream. And so there's this whole ripple effect all through multiple industries. It's not as simple as just hitting one industry. Now, the more obvious sort of one is all these supermarkets, or all of the department stores. Neiman Marcus is one here in the US, and there's lots of news about, is going to be huge sweeping ranges of bankruptcies. And let's be real, there is a lot more pressure on these companies. That they've still got this large building that they, when they bought or they rented the building, they weren't planning to lose all their income through physical store sales, as well as obviously the impact on all the staff being put off. There's a lot of pressure on businesses of all sizes, and at least the larger businesses tend to have a larger buffer, and so it tends to have more impact on small businesses. But there's no point denying all businesses are getting impact, and so you can expect, even when they start opening things up, not everybody's going to go back immediately, and so it's going to take time to rebuild site traffic. And I found this quote, and I thought it was actually quite a good one. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change, but the realist adjusts the sails. And that's obviously talking about being on a boat. And I personally try and fall into the last category, about the realist. And so it's a matter of, I look at what's going on in the world, I look at what's happening. I don't sort of say, oh no, everything's just over, we'll just give up now. That's not why I keep my eyes open. It's more a matter of saying, well, there is going to be change. Let's just take that change into account when we move forward and try to make decisions. And that's what I personally sort of believe in. I'm not going to be able to change when the companies or when the government allows people to no longer be staying at home and so forth. I'm going to let them sort that stuff out. But it's worthwhile keeping in mind and thinking about what's going to happen in the future to work out what we should be doing, and particularly in the area of e-commerce. So I actually feel quite sorry. I'm sympathetic for the governments and the officials and the health professionals who have made recommendations about closing things down. I mean, anybody who thinks that wasn't a hard decision, I don't think really understands. But even harder might be the decision about when to reopen. Like, when is it safe enough to reopen? If you make the wrong choice and people's lives get impacted, I mean, that's just hard decisions. I thought I came across this quote from an Indian parliamentarian, and it was, the COVID-19 pandemic is a huge challenge, but is also an opportunity. We need to mobilize our huge pool of scientists, engineers, data experts to work on innovative solutions needed during the crisis. Now, some might look at this and sort of say, oh, well, this is about how to deal with the disease. Now, can we work out how to find cures faster? But for me, this also talks about e-commerce and just commerce in general. How can we help commerce thrive? How can we help people stay in jobs and businesses do well? And that's, to me, one of the interesting things about e-commerce is trying to work out how to help businesses do well, even in these challenging times. Is e-commerce a part of the answer? Well, one of the opportunities is, yes, as you'd expect, more shoppers are going online. I don't know about in India, but here in the US, that presents both opportunities and challenges, actually, because while more shoppers are going online, it doesn't necessarily mean they'll set up for this sudden influx of people going online. The stock levels and demand suddenly changed. The shipping windows for my local grocery store weren't designed for rapid increases in numbers of customers. They were just growing their business slowly. But it's interesting seeing some of the stats. Now, this particular survey is from here in the US, but I suspect it's not that different from different countries. And like the second row, the number of people attending social events has gone down dramatically. Well, there's a surprise. Canceling personal trips. Some of these things are just obvious. E-commerce, people buying or thinking about buying online, like 13% up to 41% for this particular survey. That's triple. So obviously there's a lot more going on. And then you've got to ask yourself, okay, so once they start opening the stores up, is it going to go back to 13%? And my guess is no. I think as people experience the online shopping experience, people are going to say, hey, that was actually quite good. And so you'll get a larger percentage of them staying with the online experiences at a convenience. It's also people going to be more cautious. They're not going to be, as soon as the government says open up, not everybody's going to race out and go back to stores again. People are going to be cautious. They're going to get there more and more gradually over time as their confidence goes up that everything's secure. So I do think there is an opportunity in terms of scale in e-commerce right at the moment. And I do think it's going to be higher even after this virus ends and the current threat ends. It will still lift the game. But there are still challenges for e-commerce businesses. You might say, if you're online already, hey, everything's just perfect and wonderful. Well, no, it is a matter of recognizing also that there are different challenges. Like the top most purchased products. This was another survey compared to March 2019 to March 2020. And a 6 times increase in the number of bread machines being sold in March. People's buying patterns have changed. Luggage for people going on trips went down by a factor of 4. And so even if you were already online, it is a matter of recognizing there are still pressures on these businesses. There are also pressures in trying to get their own stock. If you're a retailer trying to resell other products, a lot of businesses are struggling to work out, well, can I safely bring my employees back to work yet? Are they still at home? Can I get them to do manufacturing from home? Some businesses you can do online from home, others you can't. And so there's a lot of churn going on, even for people who are already online. If you're interested, there is lots of sources of data around to have a look. These are just 2 I picked out. One on the trends.shipbob. They're a shipping company, and they'll just make some data available about trends. And you can see over a period of time, electronics during coronavirus started going up and then started dropping back. And, I would be predicting that this is because when everybody started working from home, they've started discovering that they don't have enough equipment, or they're spending more time at home, so we'll get that TV upgrade and so forth. And so there was a spike in electronics, but it's not a long-term spike, and it's already starting to drop back down again. And so understanding the likely trends can make a difference to what a business person should be doing. On the other side, there's several lines here, and the first line I'd like you to look at is the yellow line along the bottom, which was like 4 weeks ago from when I took this screenshot, and it was fairly flat. This is for jewelry. And then a week ago, this is not, I didn't just take this screenshot, but so a week ago from when I took the screenshot, suddenly the traffic for jewelry is higher, which is the green line, and then you got the last 7 days is the blue line. It was high, and then it started to drop back down. It's sort of like, well, what on earth was going on here? And of course, I've already revealed the answer. In the US, it was Mother's Day, and so a lot of people were buying jewelry ready for Mother's Day, and then of course as soon as Mother's Day's over, the traffic drops back down again. So there is also seasonality going on during this, and you've got to take that into account when doing this sort of analysis. But if you're trying to help a friend, they've got their own business, how do you get them online? And just a few little examples here. I used to get a piano teacher to come to the house and teach my kids piano, and he'd come every week, give them both a lesson, and head off to the next one. Oh, suddenly he can't go to our house. And so he started doing lessons for the kids using FaceTime. It's actually been working surprisingly well. As it turns out in his case, he was actually planning to move interstate and is going to do so. And he was worried that he's going to move interstate and then have to reestablish a new base of piano students. And it turns out with the online approach, he's actually going to still move interstate, but he can keep all his existing students. He may lose some, but he doesn't have to start from scratch. And so it's actually worked out really well for him in the end. He can now move without starting from scratch in terms of building up a base. And he just never had thought about doing it online before. And I probably would also say that probably none of the students thought about it online. Fitness classes is another one, because all of the gyms are closed down. No, they're trying Zoom meetings and so forth, trying to build classes up online. Flower arranging was a sort of a funky sort of one. It was actually a team within Google. I had noticed they often have like team building events and getting together, and they had planned to do a flower arranging course, and they were all going to go to a florist, but they couldn't anymore. Well, it turns out there are companies that will ship flowers to your home. And they'll have an instructor, and you can now do flower arranging courses online as a team. And so the whole team got there. They all jumped onto a group call again. They all, the instructor gave them advice. And so it was still a sort of like a team building event, even though it was virtual. And there's just a lot of variation you can think of about businesses that you can try and work out how to actually do them online. Now, how well will that business do after the virus? That's an interesting question. And, there is certainly risk with trying any new business idea. And some businesses like getting a haircut, well, that's pretty hard to do online. Now, I just wanted to, just before I get off the topic of COVID and coronavirus, there are a number of things that Google has been doing. If you're interested to go off and have a look, there are websites and information to help small businesses. If you have been advertising on Google in the past, there are credit programs available. It's not for new businesses, it's for sort of like businesses have been on Google for a while as a recognition and thank you for being there as customers. And there's all sorts of other information. There's lots. If you have to close down your business, how do you take it offline if you've got an online presence reliably to bring it back with the least minimal impact? And so there's advice for things like that as well.
Okay, yeah, guys. Your internet is stable, okay? It's not you, it's us. Actually, we were notified that Alan had a little bit of internet issues, and Oh, I'm back. Yeah, I'm back. Aaron had a little bit of internet issues, as you can clearly notice, and he will be back. He promised us that. In the meanwhile, what we can do to entertain you guys, we'll be waiting for Alan to come back, and we'll listen to some music. Okay, we have Alan back with us, and we'll switch over to Alan now. Hello, Alan. Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, we we're just listening to some jazz while you are off. It's cool.
Sure. My apologies. As I said, the internet here in the Bay Area, um, we've been
It,
having
it's
having
fine.
multiple drops. So I'm not quite sure how much we got through this one, but there's the acquiring customers, there's engaging with customers once they find you, there's converting them, and then how do you get them to come back? And so you've got to think about this whole funnel for your business to do well. And there's different technologies that come in at different stages. So discovery, one, you've got to have great content. You know, organic search still gets lots of people to come to your site. Site performance. If you've got a slow site, it does impact. It impacts your search rankings, and it also impacts the experience when somebody if they're trying to land on your site and it takes too long for the page to come up, they just give up and go somewhere else. SEO, marketing campaigns, paid ads, there's different ways to get people to your site. Once there, you've got to think about what the journey of the user is. And the idea is you're trying to widen the funnel at every stage. And why it's called a funnel, if it wasn't clear to start with, is you'll get a lot of people who might click on that first link and decide your site's not interesting. So you've got to maximize how it's interesting to keep the maximum number of people then to go to the next step of the journey with you. And so there's a number of different technologies. You've got performance, usability, monitoring to see how your site's going, and so forth. You've then got to convert them. For an e-commerce site, is it a smooth payment flow? Do they have to enter too much details on a mobile site? Like, nobody really wants to be typing in credit card numbers and shipping addresses if they can avoid it on a mobile phone. It's just painful. And then how do you re-engage with them? You know, can you get them to sign up to newsletters? If you track their revisit patterns, do they come back? If they do not come back, how do we get them to, could you do an email campaign to entice them back with a discount? Another approach is with progressive web apps. You've got aspects like, even though it's a website, you can add an add to homepage button on the device as if it's an app. And so they just tap on the button and they'll come back to your website. So there's different ways and different technologies that can help get those customers back. But let's look a little bit at some of the technologies. There's so many, I'm not going to go through all of the technologies. And it also means I'm not going to go to any technology in particular depth. But if I just started at the front end side, there are traditional server stacks. You have a web server, it generates HTML. A better site will have a bit of JavaScript to create a more engaging experience. And I'd say that a large number of the open source e-commerce sites still operate in this mode. So it's not like it's obsolete. It actually works pretty well. But there are newer technologies such as progressive web apps. And a progressive web app is really just a better website. It's not like you have to ditch your old one and start again. There are just more capabilities. And so you get into things like the add to homepage. You get into the what they call a service worker which is an offline cache. And the idea is, if you lose a network connection on a traditional website, you get a browser page coming up saying, sorry, can't talk to it. Well, if you create a service worker on your site, it's a bit of JavaScript code and it can intercept when the network is down. And so you can, a minimal experience would be to bring up a page to say, I'm sorry, your network is unavailable, click reload and I'll get you back there. And it's a way of not losing the customer, because if they get that broken browser page, they're probably just going to go off to a different page, like a different site, and just go back to Google search or some other activity they're doing. So even simple things can actually make a big impact particularly if you've got unreliable networks. Single page apps, to me, go that level further. Some people mix up PWAs with single page apps because they're frequently done together. There's a whole lot of JavaScript frameworks like React, Preact, Vue, Angular, and so forth. And you can build much more engaging experiences with these technology stacks. Now, I personally talk about the web a lot more because I actually work in the web area more than native apps. But you also do have native apps that you can build. And if you think about Uber or these specialty sorts of large specialty companies, they do frequently have a native app. I tend to find that native apps tend to be for larger businesses though, because they cost. There is a bigger cost to develop them. And so small businesses tend not to have native apps. They tend to build on the web because the web is really good for acquiring customers. Native apps, if you've got an existing customer base, they do tend to be more sticky once you've got the customer. And so there's nothing wrong with a native app. They are very good for sticky relationships with customers. But if you only have a native app, it can be hard to get a business off the ground. So people tend to start on the web and then they think about native apps later. But I'm not going to pretend that web development is simple. There is a lot of different things. And if you try building your own e-commerce site from your own e-commerce site from scratch, there's a lot you've got to worry about. Now, you can look at this page and look at it from two perspectives. One is, oh my goodness, do I ever want to be involved in trying to learn all these technologies? Well, that is true. There is another way of looking at it, and it's called job security. With all of these complexity, there is a real need for skilled developers and you don't have to understand all of these technologies, but there is a lot to learn. There's a lot to grow. It's not like any of this is going to go away. It's actually, these are talking about web development. This is not only for e-commerce. And so any career in the whole area of web development, these skills would be useful if you want to get into the front end side of things. And by front end, I mean the user experience, what people experience in the web browser. But no, I'm not going to go through all these. And another thing to realize is that even simple user experience changes can actually make a pretty big difference. I mean, on this site, they just changed the color of the Shop Now button and they got 20% more clicks on it. Part of the importance here is with user interface testing is, sure, doing nice looking designs helps, but it's got to be usable. And a frequent way of doing that is A/B testing. And an A/B test is where I will put users through two experiences, the old experience, and I've made a change, I'm going to put them through a new experience. And I want to work out, is this new change going to improve conversion or improve click-through rates on buttons and so forth? Google's got a whole heap of tools to help in this area. If you haven't heard of them, there is a Google Tag Manager and Analytics. There's a Data Studio for visualizing data. There's Google Optimize, which supports A/B testing. And all of these offerings have got free layers. So you can actually get on there and just play with them. Like put your own site up, give them a go. It's absolutely free to give these different tools a try. Some of the tools have got paid versions as well, which got more features. But if you're just trying to get a handle on it and understand how some of these tools work, it doesn't cost a cent to get up and going. So what about back-end development stacks? And by back-end, I mean the compute power that's behind the storefront. Well, there's a lot more diversity here. If you're working just, for example, some people get a business up and they just do it purely on a marketplace. But if you're doing that, you've got no effort to get the back end up at all. You've also got no control over the whole experience. And for a small business starting getting online for the first time, marketplaces are actually quite a good option. You don't have much effort. You don't necessarily know what you're doing, and so you don't actually miss the control. You're handing over all that control to the marketplace vendor. Well, guess what? They specialize in this area. They know quite a bit about it. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to do. The next one is to go onto the SaaS vendors, and there are, I don't know the big, well, actually I've got a slide coming up. And so you've got companies like Shopify. There are other ones, BigCommerce, Volusion, VTEX. Often the companies specialize in different markets. Shopify have been doing a bit of a push and doing quite well internationally these days. Like they came out of Canada. But it's relatively low effort to get your site up, and you get a degree of control. You can customize the interface a bit. You can pick different extensions, but they provide all the back end. You don't have to get any equipment up and going, and you don't have to choose a development stack. The next one I get into is PaaS, and this tends to be done with more like open source platforms, where they make it easy to run the software, and it might be like, we're going to look at a couple later on. You've got to go through a degree of effort to get them up and going with the PaaS, but they provide a lot of tools. It's not too much work, and you start to get more control over your experience. You can customize it a lot more. And so if your business is trying to get online and you need more flexibility and control, if the cookie cutters of the marketplaces is not good enough, well, that's where you start looking into these other platforms. And then you can go as far as self-hosted. Like, I'm going to run my own equipment. I'm going to build up the site. I might use as open source. I might actually build the whole site from scratch. Like an Uber. I very much doubt Uber has used any existing e-commerce platform to build their online presence. And it's just a question of scale, a question of resourcing and so forth. So it's not a matter of saying one of these things is the right way to go and the others is always wrong. It's more a matter of the development stack you're going to use depends upon which route you go. And there is a lot of options there. Too much to actually go through and talk about, so I'm not actually going to go into any more detail on the backend stacks. I did want to talk about one little platform which can be actually quite fun, which actually launched in India first, which is called the Google Spot platform. It's part of Google Pay. And what it allows you to do, if you look at the image first on the at the beginning there, is they call it spots, and that you can have individual people, but you can also have businesses, and they call them business spots. And it's like your spot within the Google Pay app. And so if you've worked with a business before, it gets into geofencing. So when you move around, and if you go into a store, it's got support for it. That might pop up near the beginning of the list. And it's basically a link that will take you off to a website. And so it could be an existing website, or it could be a simplified website designed to do for a spot. There is a second way to get to it, however, which is QR codes. And the marketing people came up with, oh, let's do round ones because they're spots, business spots. Hey, they look quite pretty. But you could actually send them out to people. You can have them in your store. You may actually see some stores with QR codes of different types around already for payments. But you can link these off to one of your websites. Within the spot, it actually opens up within the Google Pay app. And the advantage of that is it's got your shipping details. It's got your payment details. You can keep track of all your purchases. And so you also don't have to do much on your website to actually around payments, because you've got this nice, simple API to actually receive a payment. And so it makes it, it's an interesting opportunity to create small, customized experiences complete with payments. So it's an interesting technology if you're want to dig up on that one. It's still a relatively new program, unfortunately. There's only so much information about it available on the web, but it is one worth having a bit of a look at. And how it basically works, if you know a little bit about web development, is it makes additional JavaScript APIs available to the website. So you can just use any website technology you like, throw in a bit more JavaScript, detect if the API is available, and tweak the experience a bit, because now you don't have to put a full payment experience up there. And so if you don't have an existing e-commerce site, you might do information like saying, well, here's a phone number, call us and we'll learn more. Otherwise, you can actually integrate payments, and the payments will go through the Google Pay app to actually complete the payment and get the transfer money over to you. But onto the home stretch. If I just talked about e-commerce developers and a little bit about opportunities and challenges, and I'm saying this primarily for someone thinking about, like, do you want a career in e-commerce? What does the future hold? Well, just to summarize, e-commerce is growing. The coronavirus has given it a sudden push. I don't think it will drop back to the way it was. It will drop as businesses start to open up. I think you've got to expect that. But more and more shoppers are going online. It's been this constant trend over a period of time. There is a huge diversity of effort and work that you can do. Everything from shipping logistics to SEO and so forth. But I wouldn't say that there's no challenges going on at the same time, because there are very dynamic market conditions. A lot of businesses are trying to get online. They're not all going to succeed. And I'm sad to say that, but I think it's better to be realistic about these things. So it's a matter of taking it to me as a career, as a long-term commitment to sort of say, yeah, this is an area, I think it has got a future. I'm not going to give up just because a business goes belly up. Well, guess what? It is going to happen. There is a lot of churn going on in industry. But I do think e-commerce as a whole is an area that is going to continue to grow, and more rapidly as a result of the virus. So what sort of jobs are there in the space? Well, you've got SEO consultants, you've got social media consultants. Obviously, some of these things you've actually got to understand the field before you can do the job. But if you're helping a small business who knows absolutely nothing about IT, actually you can still do a fair bit even without knowing a lot yourself. There are niche market e-commerce retailers, and one of the interesting ones, for example, I came across some people putting up a marketplace for secondhand airplane parts, and it's sort of like, wow, that's pretty specialty. Well, it turns out there's a whole lot of special regulations about selling secondhand air parts, because you have to track where they came from, where they go to. Governments care about every single part, because if there's ever a problem with them, they want to trace back everybody who's got that part. And so there's a lot of paperwork and traceability needed for airplane parts. And so it actually made sense having this specialty marketplace that made it easy to track all the purchases and where all these parts went, and then maintenance information and so forth. But then you get into more skilled areas, in terms of developers, like web designers, if you're getting into the front end area, web developers, if talking more about the code behind that, and more of the JavaScript code, potentially. There's also technical writers, IT support, and operations support. You can become an expert in a particular field. This might be less relevant if you're doing a computer science course, but there's also like affiliate marketers, e-commerce consultants, bloggers, YouTubers, podcasters, social media influencers. Any field, anything you know about, you can potentially try and get online and become an expert and get yourself known in that area. I also think it's worthwhile thinking about the sort of business that you might be looking to join. There are smaller businesses, there are larger businesses. A small business, you tend to get a lot more breadth of what you would be doing. A large business, you tend to be more siloed, but there may be more job security. There are also local businesses or international ones. If you're getting a job in an international business, you may have more opportunity and more exposure to overseas and how things are going. Are you going to work for an agency? They help lots of merchants. You can actually get a great deal of knowledge very quickly working at an agency. And so starting off your career at an agency might be a good way to learn the field. If you work at a merchant, you may get more depth, but you'll only understand how that merchant works. You got to pick, are you going to go the open source route or the SaaS and so forth? And are you going to go for just simple experiences, or do you want to build custom experiences? An example of a custom experience might be another one, like I remember a pet food company, and they sort of said, well, we actually build custom food mixes. We want to ask the user a series of questions about their pet and then recommend a mix based on that. And so it's not just a matter of we're going to list 20 products on the screen and pick one. The experience is actually a questionnaire. And after you go through the questionnaire, then they make recommendations of products afterwards. And so that's not a traditional experience, but you can do custom experiences to build better experiences for particular merchants. So what happens if you're saying, okay, I'm a developer already, I'm interested. How can I sort of get something up and going without actually getting a job yet? Well, this is from BuiltWith. It's got a URL down at the bottom. It's trends.builtwith.com/shop. This is for India. And if you look at the top platforms, now this is looking at by domain name. And so this is not talking about the size, like Amazon is one slither of other. So it's not by volume of traffic, it's by number of domain names. But over half of the e-commerce sites there are actually on open source platforms. So you can pick one of these platforms. You can download the code, you can run it on your own laptop, and you can start getting your hands dirty. And there's online communities that you can go off and ask questions. And so if you really want to get your hands dirty, a lot of these platforms you can do absolutely for free to start learning. Like I've highlighted WooCommerce, OpenCart, and Magento, if the tech's not reading. They're three of the big ones in India. Now that site, if you want to look international, you can cut the data in different ways. This is also across all sites. This includes tiny sites. As you go to larger sites, you'll find that WooCommerce will drop in percentage and other ones, and like Magento, increases in percentage. And so different platforms are different percentage of the market. So it's interesting to go over there and just sort of browse around the data a little bit. But you can get your hands dirty. You can play with some of these tools and actually, do it on your own spare time if you want to. So that is all I had. Hopefully this was useful, and I shall hand it back. So if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat session.
Okay, yeah, sorry. I was on mute and I was going on blabbering for around 1 minute now. So the technical difficulties are a common thing. Like we did a lot of sessions without any technical difficulties. So we have to have our fair share of technical difficulties. uh, Sir, that was a really great session that we had. I think a lot of the people who are into building websites and building e-commerce websites in particular, and a lot of people are using e-commerce websites, they never knew how difficult uh, the back side of it looks like. Like it's just a simple flow. I'll click this product, I'll add to cart, I'll buy it. That's it. But what all goes into building it, that it gave a really good overview about it. And
Yeah, and it's something that people don't necessarily realize, that a lot of people have done a lot of optimization and analysis, like the good sites, to make it such an easy flow. But an easy flow for one product, like for a marketplace, it tends to be pick a product, add it to your cart, ship it. But if you're got on a clothing site, you want a lot more flexibility. Like, how do I understand the different color options? How do I understand the different stock options, like the different sizes and so forth? And so that the actual experiences, the experience you want for your market, you can really improve the experience and increase your conversion rates if you do something custom for that business.
Exactly. Like that will be something particular, that will be something unique to that particular business.
Yeah.
Sir, if you could allow me, I'll just join you on that screen so that the conversation doesn't look really one-sided. Uh, yeah, this is good. We'll be waiting for people to drop their questions. Until that, I had a few pointers from your whole presentation, sir. Uh, you talked about A/B testing, and I've seen A/B testing in Firebase while working with Firebase, and I've seen it a lot of times. I've wondered what's the use of that, and I think I got cleared about it. Like, yeah, I never knew that it was such a thing existed like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It just audio dropped out when you said what you were talking about.
I said, sir, I've seen a lot. I have seen while working on Firebase, I've seen the A/B testing platform,
A/B
and
testing, yeah.
I've always wondered what that is. Like,
yeah, well, A/B testing is a personal thing that's really, really important to customize experiences. And the reality is, different sites have different qualities of experience of what is possible. The most popular A/B testing platforms actually work by injecting JavaScript into the page. And what they do is they allow you to allow a marketer to sort of change the color of a button or move a button around on the page. And so a little bit of JavaScript runs on the page and it adjusts it for half of the users. And then it measures, well, when I made those adjustments, did I get more conversion? Did I get more people clicking the button and so forth as a result? And so some of the platforms like Optimizely, there's a number of platforms out there. Google has got one, it's called Google Optimize. It's free. It's good in some cases, it's not good in others. You obviously should pick the best one for your site if you're serious about it. But it makes it easy to set up experiments to try and tweak. And the more you do a custom site, the less somebody else has done it before. I mean, if it's just a traditional marketplace sort of site where you got products, you add them to your cart, hey, there's lots of advice out there on the web. You can go off, do a Google search, find some information, get an answer to your question. But if you're doing a custom, like I'm doing a survey to work out what pet food to give my pet, well, not many other people have done that. And so this is where A/B testing becomes critical. Do the A/B testing to work out what's going to work.
Actually, like I've noticed, like a little bit of small differences can bring about a really huge marginal change in a whole product. Like
Yeah.
I can list out one feature, like this one particular interesting thing I read about this one time to all the viewers watching. If you have heard about this toothpaste company called Colgate, they did a small change in that whole product. What they did was they increased the size of the hole from which toothpaste actually comes out, and that increased their whole revenue by like 50% or something. Like that was great. So I can see a few questions dropping in the comment section. I'll bring out the first one from Pradyum Verma, and he wants to know, where do you see augment or virtual reality in e-commerce, especially during this lockdown?
Yeah, I think augmented reality has got a big place in e-commerce in the future. Virtual reality, I think personally less so, and it's just about the shopping experience. Like both of them, you need a 3D model, and you've got to get the 3D model of the data. And if it's provided by the provider of the product, great. Otherwise, you've got to produce it, and it's expensive to produce, and that's been one of the bottlenecks of the area. But VR, you've got to get a headset on, so your customers have got to have a headset. So that's where I see VR has got less scope in general. AR you can do with a phone today, and that suddenly makes it a lot more like your reach is much greater. And if you want to try out that bit of furniture or that new vase and see what it's going to look like in a place, hey, it's great. And so I actually think there is a future in AR to allow people to experience the products a lot more. There are other experiences like trying on makeup. You know, what does that makeup color look on for my eyebrows? And you can actually, there's sites you can go and you can try the makeup on, and you'll see it on your face. Well, they help you decide between products. And so those sorts of experiences, again, and customized experiences, I do think have got a lot of future.
Actually. Moving on, sir, the next question is from Akash Sharma. And he wants to know, do you think now e-commerce sites will use more robots and drones for delivery?
I think it's likely. I think the challenge there is there's lots of, like for drones, there's lots of federal and government regulations about having things flying around in the air, and especially if they're noisy and noise pollution. Like I don't really want to be out in my backyard and again getting this constant buzz of drones zooming around the sky all the time. I think they're very interesting for some areas, like in city areas which are already noisy. Who cares? I think they're also interesting, like robots. They're experimenting with like reducing the manpower down streets to try and, like here in the US, some areas they send like, I'll get a robot and I'll just go down the street. So it's not going to go from all the way from the depot, but I'll pull up a truck and I'll send the robot off and I'll do deliveries and drop things off. I think it's still pretty early though. I think it's hard. There's no standardization. Like, where do you drop it off? What happens if that house has got stairs? What happens if the driveway has got repairs going on? Like, there's so many cases where they're not able to do things yet. So I think a lot of people are experimenting with it. I think it could still be like 5 years off before they become really popular. There was an interesting COVID story about robots though. They were using it for medical deliveries to a hospital. And so the truck would arrive outside. The people wouldn't go inside. They wouldn't cross the line. They'd use a robot to then get the delivery from the truck to inside the hospital, and using sort of effectively that was just manually driven around, but it offered an air gap. So there are particular cases where they're particularly useful. Another one is like out back in Australia where I came from. It's harder to get deliveries there And so they've got options like sizable drones for delivery, because it actually turns out to be cheaper than sending a person in a truck to deliver it. So there are different options, but I don't think it's going to make a huge difference yet. I think it's more, there's a lot more robots going on inside warehouses, like to optimize storage capacity of a warehouse, to optimize packing an order for something like Amazon. There, where robots can make a lot of sense to actually reduce the manpower and get more efficiency at the scale.
Actually. So Akash, you would have to wait 5 more years to see your dream come true. So
That's
we
my
talked
prediction.
so we actually you talked about this government policies and all regulations that need to be followed. That reminded me about something you talked about in your pitch, sir. You told about a site that sells airplane parts. Like
Yep.
I thought that is only possible in the darknet or something. Like
No, it's a whole industry. There's
oh
nothing
wow,
wrong with selling a second airplane part. It's more a question of making sure that the part's still got to be of good quality, and so it's got to go through various checks. You've got to be able to prove who it's going to, that there may be restrictions on what countries you can sell to. And so people are actually exploring things like blockchain technologies to be able to
yeah,
get the traceability and proof of the history of a part, and so that when you get a part via a secondhand, you can actually trust it. I mean, just because it's secondhand doesn't mean it's not good quality anymore. If a plane was involved in a crash, well, okay, you might be a little bit worried about those parts. But if it's just gone out of service, or if the company's gone bankrupt, or there's a whole lot of other reasons that
yeah.
you actually want a secondhand part.
Actually, on the same line, sir, we have another question. Rajesh wants to know, sir, please light upon the effect of government policies that can actually affect the e-commerce.
Sure. Well, there's lots. Two that come to mind in particular, if I start with payments, there's a lot of regulation around payments and what you're allowed to do. And I actually say as a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing, because there's a lot of potential fraud and so on going on. Some of it's industry regulated as well. You might have heard of a standard called PCI DSS, which is payment card industry. I forget what the DSS, but it's about protecting user data and things you have to do to make sure that you're protecting the credit card information of your shoppers. And if you go with a marketplace, that's all done for you. If you're hosting your own site, you've got to worry about that more. Now, there are ways of doing the integrations, and you normally have payment processes you integrate with. For example, if you use PayPal, there's certain ways to integrate PayPal onto your site where it'll be, they take the PCI DSS burden away from you a lot more. And so the way you integrate payments onto your e-commerce site makes a big difference. How you actually obey a lot of the payment regulations. Also, you'll find that companies like PayPal are not in every country, and well, there's regulations in the country that they have to. So if you're in the payments area, it can be hard to get from country to country because the regulations and laws are different in each country. The other area is things like privacy and like cookie tracking. GDPR, like everybody these days comes along to a site and says, "Oh, my site uses cookies to track you. Is this okay? Can you?" And in California, there's now rules that say, "Well, no, you don't have to worry about GDPR, but you have to sort of say you're allowed to opt out of us tracking you and selling your data to marketing sites." Brazil have got some laws that have come up, and there's more and more of these laws that are coming up. The real challenge for an e-commerce site is if it's an international site, you've got to obey all the laws at once. And so that's why, like in America, you don't have to do GDPR for the US, but in case you get somebody from Europe coming, all Americans are now going through these pop-ups. And I think there's a real challenge. And there's a lot of work I know going on at Google about privacy and how to build better experiences in these areas. So yeah, I think those are the two sort of primary ones: making sure you're meeting all your GDPR, all your different regulations if you really want an international site, and payments is another one.
Okay, I think that clears up. And the next question is from Aman, and he wants to know what subjects of research could help in better e-commerce experience in both building them and consuming them.
I think machine learning and AI systems have got a lot of potential to improve sites. Can you build a site that automatically starts adjusting things? Like, why do I as a human have to do an A/B test? Why can't I get the site to start changing button positions or colors and learn from that which is the best way to go? Or how can I predict what products are selling the best? When like personalization is a big area for an e-commerce site. When if somebody returns to a site, or even if they arrive the first time, can I predict their interests? Can I show them, like, if I know that they looked at men's watches last time they visited my site, when they come back, maybe I should be showing them men's shoes on the homepage instead of ladies' accessories. And so the more you can understand about the customers and what products they looked at and what products they clicked on, and this is where, you know, it is actually valuable to track what the user does on your site. You can then feed that into AI systems to try and predict, well, what offers should I be making to them? What related products are the best ones to show them? Should I not show them related products because I may get more distracted and so not purchase something? There's a lot you can do from learning from behaviors of some users to work out what you should be doing for further customers to build them better experiences. So I think AI has got lots of application. And then you can get onto the other side, behind the scenes, like inventory management. How do I optimize my delivery and to reduce shipping time and shipping costs? What is the best way to get products out to people? Because I want to reduce my shipping costs as a merchant. But should I offer free shipping to everybody? Should I offer free shipping to people only over orders over $50? There's a whole lot of decisions you've got to make, and AI systems can help make better decisions here and optimize your business. It tends to be more for larger business, but I think there's a lot of research in that area. You get into vision systems. Can I use vision to categorize products better and so make up better recommendations? Oh, you looked at this product. Well, these other products came up as being, you must be looking to go out for a party. So here are a whole lot of party accessories and dresses and shoes. And I'll start making these as suggestions to you as well.
Yeah. Basically the next big thing is AI. So
I think it is.
Yeah, integrating it is essential. Will become an essential part in building a future e-commerce website, I guess.
I think it will. I think you're starting to get it. They're building it into reporting and so forth. But sometimes you really need to make it specialist based on your business, and that gets harder to customize.
So the next question is from Akash, and he wants to know: will startups be able to compete with existing e-commerce giants now?
I think some of the e-commerce giants, you've got to remember, are marketplaces, and so they sell products from third parties as well. And so it's not always direct competition. Absolutely, there is a challenge and a struggle there, and like a big concern is, like, I know originally when Amazon was taking over the US, as a small business, should I be putting my products there because they can see all my sales and they can work out that my business is profitable, and then they might try and do it as well. And yeah, it does happen, and so it's a hard challenge. But well, guess what? All retailers have not gone out of business. In the US, e-commerce is still a small percentage of total retail sales. Is it like 15%? It's probably wackier at the moment, but there's an awful lot of retail going on that is nothing to do with e-commerce still. So do I see there's still a place for small merchants? Yes. You just need to go into it intelligently. If I'm a restaurant business, I'm not particularly worried about Amazon in the same extent, but I'm going to be focusing on local advertising and trying to get people around me to find me. I'm not going to go on an international advertising campaign. And so what you've got to do is think about, what can you do that is customized, that is niche, that is different? I don't expect Amazon to do into that flower example. Oh, we'll ship flowers and have an expert go online with you and do flower arrangement classes online together. I don't expect that ever to be of interest to Amazon. They tend to be more, here's a list of products, buy from my list. We'll give you lots of reviews. We'll give you lots of information. No, these sorts of experiences are great experiences for shoppers if you're trying to buy a shrink-wrapped box. Toy companies just selling one of 50 toys that you just get from standard suppliers, I think they will struggle against a marketplace, because the marketplace can get great shipping, it can get reduced costs. But there's an awful lot of niche areas, and what you've got to do is find that sort of area where you can be different do something that these large sites can't do. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for that personally.
I think so as well. So the next question is from Supratim, and he wants to know, how do you cope up in e-commerce boost during COVID-19?
How do you cope with the boost? So I may not be answering the question. I'm trying to actually make sure I understand the question completely. But there is certainly a real challenge of, as the number of sales have gone up, a lot of platforms have struggled, and particularly the ones that optimize, like, for example, inventory levels. If you're a retailer, you don't produce the goods, you're getting the goods from someone else. Well, suddenly, everybody else is trying to buy the same supplies. Like if you're trying to get pasta here in the US, everybody wants, and it's probably rice in India. A lot of people suddenly wanted to buy and stock up on it, and the shelves in the supermarket emptied instantly. And well, if I'm trying to sell that online, I've got to work out my sources and just being able to get the sources of data. And so a lot of the challenges were around, if I'm a manufacturer, how do I actually build anything at the moment? How do I keep my workers safe? Am I actually even allowed to get them to turn up to work? If I'm selling goods from someone else, well, hey, all my suppliers are going through all these challenges. It is just a real struggle. I'm not going to pretend there's a wonderful answer to those sorts of things. If you're providing a service, well, how many slots have you got available? So it's not necessarily easy to deal with scope, and it depends on your business a lot, where your bottlenecks are. You've also got how do you scale up your actual site to handle the increased traffic. But I haven't actually heard that being so much of a problem for most people. It has been more about supply. It's been more about shipping. It's been more about huge. I've got a huge increase in demand, but I can't build bread makers any faster to sort of sell them, and I can't find them to actually sell, and so I actually have to close my business down because I don't have the stock to sell. That's where I've seen it, and that's just hard. I don't have a wonderful answer for that one.
That is completely fine, sir. So moving on, I actually have a personal question of mine that I'd like to pop up. Actually, was wondering if we talked about e-commerce and how it goes on in the background of it, how everything works and stuff. Like, I was thinking, like, what is a better target? What would pull a better target audience? A e-commerce website or a e-commerce app? And considering what should be a difficult thing to build on.
Sure. I think it partly depends upon what you're trying to sell, what your commerce business is. It's like Uber purely as a website and not having a native app doesn't, like, or Ola, and some of these very niche, very customized experiences. It doesn't feel right to me. But I talked about it a little bit during the deck. If you're trying to, websites have been proving to be better for customer acquisition.
Okay.
Native apps have proven in general to be better for stickiness. And so if you can afford it, doing both together makes sense. Like if you give up on your web presence and only have a native app, it's really hard potentially to acquire customers. Now, you may have a website just talking about it and have a link button to download the app, but you've got to think about both. If you're developing something new, how are you going to acquire your first customers is a really important question you've got to come up with an answer for. And so a lot of e-commerce sites, the smaller ones, only do the web app because being discovered is the absolute priority for them. Now, if you've got a large customer base, so what I didn't talk about is there's different sorts of businesses. Like there's B2C. I'm a business, I'm selling to direct consumers. But there's also B2B, a business selling to other businesses. And it might be cleaning supplies. It might be raw parts needed to go off and build your car. There's a whole lot of different experiences. B2B, you don't have as many customers. You actually build a relationship with a small number of customers, and the site is just there to make collecting orders easier and more efficient. And so there's a huge variety of types of businesses. A B2B might get more value out of an app than a website because they don't need to get discovered. They've got salespeople going out doing that. So I don't think there's a single flat answer, but I think the acquisition of new people is a very important decision if you're trying to launch something new. And that's, to me, actually where I drive between the app and a website, which I'd do first.
Okay, I think that clears some part of my doubt. And uh, s- with that, I think we have come to the end of the question Q&A session. Uh, if I'm okay, I think we have one more question popping. Give it a sec. Is that okay? Yeah. So uh, the question is from Rajesh, and he wants to know, sir, you talked about privacy security, and his question is, what are the major area or information that can be attacked easily by any competitors?
So there is privacy security, and then there's competitors. I don't see competitors as the primary concern about security. It's usually hackers, and usually hackers trying to get in and steal credit card information or submit fraudulent orders using somebody else's details. That tends to be where security comes in. Maybe you know something that I don't. The competitors are interested in getting information, and that's because like pricing your prices compared to your competitors, well, that's something you got to do in business. And so understanding what your competitors are doing is a useful thing to be doing as part of your business. But it's I haven't seen it being a widespread problem that one competitor is stealing a whole lot of privacy information from another because it's illegal. And most businesses don't go around making their business based on illegal sort of activities. The bigger challenge I see with privacy is um, open source. Like if you go with if you build your own site, whether it's open source or you built the whole site for yourself from scratch, getting security right is really hard, unfortunately, because the people who try all sorts of clever techniques. And it can be one of the advantages of being on like a SaaS platform. They've got an IT security team. They've got to worry about security. You can just leverage from their abilities. Um, but if you really need the customization, then you need to do it. And this is where also agencies can be helpful, like getting skilled experts that's got a team who has done it before, rather than trying to do everything yourself, is trying to find one that's got enough security background to protect against the most common sort of areas. OWASP, OWASP, is one example of an organization that just specializes in web security. That like they just promote the most common vulnerabilities and help people to try and mitigate against them. So OWASP is a great source if you want to learn more about security and how to sort of protect a site. But the more you do, the more you're building custom interfaces, the more you've got to make sure you don't forget security during it. You can't design a solution and then add security later. It generally doesn't work. You really should be thinking about security. And the good platforms build it more in, and so it's hard to build a exposed site. But it's things like, can they inject JavaScript onto your site? Can they inject SQL statements in any input fields, and it messes up your database and so forth. These are the traditional sorts of attack vectors, and it's just a matter of writing code that protects against them.
Uh, I think that clears Rajesh's doubt, and we actually had a follow-up question which asked about what the steps are taken to keep the privacy of the customers in mind. I think you cleared that as well in this answer. So, uh, on
I
that
think
note, yeah,
I think
yes, sir.
privacy is a big area going on, and there's a lot of work going on. If you look into Chrome and other sorts of teams and blog posts, there's actually a lot of information about privacy, and it's a lot of interest to Google. And people will say, Google doesn't care about privacy. They just want to steal everything. Actually, it's not true. We care about making great experiences for people, and a lot of the trends in privacy are good ones. We just sort of, at the same time, are saying, well, people have got to run their businesses on the web. How do you find the right balance between privacy and giving controls to the end users and still allowing the web to thrive? Because if you get onto other platforms, the closed platforms, a lot of them don't have to worry about aspects like privacy. You know, they've got access to all your data.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting thing. If you're interested in it, I know there are projects going on right now and discussions around, there's been changes to the cookie strategies and so forth about what data can you share. And Safari have locked things down even further, and it's creating change. change is not necessarily bad, but it is painful while you're going through it. So if you're interested in the privacy field, there is a lot of discussion going on in that area right now. So it is worth having a look at.
So people watching the stream, do keep in mind Google respects your privacy. Don't ever think anything about from that. Uh, it's good to have clarified from personnel who is currently a Googler. So I think on that note, it was a really good time we had with you, sir, and it's amazing to see a lot of people sticking with us till the end. As you can see, it's late at night here at India, so it's good to have people stay back to have this watch this interactive session, sir. And we are really sorry to have woken you up early in the morning there. So
It was. I really thank you for inviting me. It has been great. Thank you for having me.
it was an honor to have you with us as well, sir. And on that note, would you like to have some parting words with us?
I think so. When you first reached out to me, you're sort of talking about like students and developers, and so that's why I focused on like to me that there's this, there. It's I didn't start my career in e-commerce, but there's so much to it that it's just so fascinating, and it's changing all the time, and it's evolving, and it's getting more customized, it's getting more personalized, it's getting more custom experiences, and it's no longer. It started off just sitting on the side. I have my business, and oh yeah, I'll try and sell something on online as well. Well, now it's becoming merged into the very core of businesses a lot more, and the technology underpinning it is really a part of your core business, and it should be. And so I don't think e-commerce is going away. And so I think, in terms of career directions, I think it's definitely one. It's not the only one, of course, but it is a very dynamic field. Things are changing, things are continually evolving, and that's why I'm here. I've actually find it really fascinating and seeing what all the new things coming on down the pipe are as well.
We are happy that you think that way because that led us to you and led to all the people watching us right now to know a lot more about what's going on. Uh, on that note, sir, it was really good to have you. And for a final thank you, I would follow a trend that I've been doing in this particular stream. I've been pulling up screens from my laptop. So I'd say, hey Google, please thank you, sir, for his wonderful session with us today. And is my screen visible? Yeah, awesome, great.
Thank you.
Uh, so thank you, sir. It was really great to have you with us. Thank you for all the insights. We'll hope to see you in future sessions with us. And on that note, have a good day, sir.
Good night.
Thank you. So, guys, welcome back. This is Amrit, your host, and that was a really great session we had with sir today. And as you are familiar, we had quite a few technical difficulties. But what's an event without a little bit of technical difficulty? Uh, on that note, I'd like to point out the fact that we are having the next webinar on tomorrow. We have the next webinar tomorrow, and we have a really amazing guest for tomorrow's session. I can't find a banner for tomorrow. It's fine. I can tell you that because I know it. The tomorrow session we are having Mr. Cherry Santoshi, who is a program manager at HackerArt. Uh, and he'll be talking about hackathons. And I'm pretty sure you are interested to know all about hackathons because we are all from a hackathon background students, and all developers who are currently watching us have attended one of at least one hackathon in their complete lifetime. So it'll be an interesting session to have tomorrow. And on that note, I'd say thank you, good night, and that's all from me. Have a good night. Peace out.